Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Guitar Live. I'm Tomas Michaud, for those of you who are new here. And I'm going to do my best to answer all your guitar related questions today. I have some pre submitted ones, and feel free at any time to add to the chat. If you could please start with the word question so I can separate quickly in my visual the questions from the comments. I really appreciate it. And if I miss your question, please you just ask it again later. I tend to not go all the way back to the top, and if I miss a question, that way I'll see it again. I have a fairly elaborate pre-submitted question that I'm going to use to actually do quite a bit of talking about how to look at the guitar neck and the notes. So I'm going to read the question, slight rephrasing of the question. I tried to simplify it a little bit. I want you to know that no matter whether you're interested in theory or not, or what level you are, I'm going to try to make this applicable to everyone. So this is by Dan. All of this is not personally oriented towards you. I'm going to include things that you might even said you already know, just to make sure everybody is on the same page, and it can be useful to everybody on the show today. Great question. Here we go. My goal is to, by the way, at the end, I will do a drawing, as I always do, for the members of Real Guitar Success. And if at any time you do think of a question, go ahead and add it right away. I'll come back to it after I answer the questions that are pre-submitted. My goal is to have the ability to play chords using the entire fretboard. What's the best way to learn each shape or position of the triads on the fretboard? Is there a pattern? Is it movable sometimes or all the time? Are there principles and rules that I can apply for each of the chords I choose to learn, or is it just a memorization process? He goes on to say he understands the formula basically for triads. The 1, 3, and 5 notes make a major triad, a minor triad. So I won't read all that. And then there's some language about intervals, and I'm honestly not sure, Dan, I fully understand what you're trying to say there. You might be mistaken, or you might be using the word interval to mean different arrangements of the chords. There's another word for that. I'll think of it in a minute. But in any case, let me get to the beginning of that. Let me grab my guitar too, so I can demonstrate. So I have two parts to say about this. And let me start with first giving some ideas on how to achieve what you said is your goal, is to play chords all around the fretboard. Triads, by the way, for everybody, just so we're on the same page, are basically the 3 notes that make up a chord. He calls it the 1, 3, and 5. It's because if we take a scale, let's say a C scale, and you want a basic C triad, you would take the first note C, go to 3, E, and then 5, G, and that would make a C triad. And you go anywhere, wherever you start. You just 1, 3, and 5. You basically start with that note, skip a note, and that makes a triad. Depending on how the intervals fall, in other words, the distance between the notes, it will be either major, minor, or possibly diminished. So in the case of a C chord, 1, 3, 5, C, E, G, the note C, E, and G, the interval between a C and an E is what we call a major third. And the interval from that middle note, the E to the G, is a minor third. That makes a major chord. If we change that formula and I'll start with a D. A D, E, F, right? I skipped a note, D, E, F, D, F, G, A. D, F, A would be a D chord. The interval between D and F, D, E, F, naturally falls within the scale as a minor third. It's a 3 half steps. Naturally, because if you just take the scale and you take those notes and you don't put sharps or flats or anything, that's how it falls. The second note in a major scale will always, if you count up to the third of a chord, when you're making a chord with that note, it's going to be a minor third, and then the next interval will be a major third that makes a minor chord. So we'll stick to major and minor right now. Diminished is a little different. So hopefully that at least gets everybody on the same page, theoretically. And Dan is asking, how can I basically learn those triads all up and down the guitar neck? First of all, that practice would work better on the piano. It doesn't work so good on the guitar because the way the guitar is constructed, you can't always play the triads up and down the neck because of the distances between the notes and the way the strings are formed. So on the piano, you basically can just play the notes and make a triad. Inversion was the word I was looking for, not interval, inversion. Inversion just means instead of that C on the bottom of a C chord, you start with the third, the E, and then you still make the chord, but you're starting with the E on the bottom or the bass note. That's a first inversion. And if you started with the fifth of the chord, that would be a second inversion. I know that's a lot, and it's not something you really need to memorize. That was for you, Dan. I believe what you were trying to say, inversion as opposed to interval, in that latter part of the question. So the practice of learning triads all around the neck is not so practical on the guitar. It's not really useful. There's some benefit to trying just out of curiosity to see if you can make the triads to learn the guitar neck, but to actually play the chords up and down the neck, not that practical by learning triads. Let me suggest a practice that I think would be more in line with this goal, considering we're talking about guitar. And of course, I wrote notes. Thank you, Dan, for submitting the question ahead of time. Gave me a chance to think about it and to write some notes so I could do it in a decent order. First of all, probably, if you haven't, Dan, anybody who wants to do this, really, the first practice is to just learn the notes on the fretboard. And there's several ways to do that. I have a whole course on that in the Real Guitar Success, and I'll put a link to that for members of Real Guitar Success. But one thing that I learned early on that I found very helpful was just to play a note on one string and then find that note on the next string. So what I did, I found the next E. Now we'll go to the next string. So I guess you can tell I've done this before, but if you have to search around a little bit, that's a process. You get better at it, and you go all the way up and down the neck. Try to stretch that. Try to, even on the same string, try to find the next E. I know the next E is on the 12th fret of any open string. So I'm finding that same E. Now, I'm going to kind of stop a process. I'm going down numbers to start with a basic principle that I teach and I think is very important. Let your intellectualizing, understanding, using the brain, follow your ears when you're learning music. Now, let me explain that a little bit. As adults, we are used to using our brain to get things. This is what has proven to be successful to get us through school, much of our jobs probably, and it's sort of like if you're used to using a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. Well, when you're learning music, that doesn't work so good. Music is an oral art, A-U-R-A-L. And even if you never understood anything that you were doing, if you could hear music in your head and play it, you would be a great musician, if you could do that well. Understanding is a support mechanism, but by letting it trail your listening, you're putting the emphasis on what's most important, and it will serve you as opposed to becoming a stumbling block and actually making it hard to play musically and artfully. So, this will make more sense as I go on. Listen first. Let the understanding and intellectualizing trail. This applies to other art forms too, dance particularly. I learned this the hard way. take salsa dancing and really trying to think out the steps. And believe me, nobody wanted to dance with me when I was doing that. Finally, I got to a point where I realized, hey, this is kind of like music. You got to let go of the intellectualizing. Take the basics that you can do. Forget all this complicated steps and movement. Start with the basics. Get good at it to where you don't have to think about it. And people wanted to dance with me. And then I got better at the complicated steps because I had a chance to practice. Same with music, really, and maybe even more so. To sound like music, you can't think through the chords and the scales. And I get that the idea is to think it, then not have to think about it. But if you get in the habit of thinking through everything, it gets harder and harder to let that go. Listen first, then let the intellectualizing and thinking support that, always pushing you towards listening to what you're thinking. I'm making a triad. It's the 1, 3, 5. Listen to the notes carefully as you make them. And with the intention of memorizing that sound, the sound 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, da, da, da. I'm not thinking, oh, I got to go up a major third. Now I got my, no, I'm here, the notes. My fingers go to that sound. And of course, that's what you do when you're playing. You can't think fast enough to think, oh, I need my third major. No, what you're doing is you're listening. You hear da 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 da, and the fingers go there. So, believe me, this will make more sense as I go on. Learn the notes on the fretboard with an emphasis on listening to what you're doing. Listen to that E. Listen. There. I didn't have to think 12th fret. I'm thinking, I want that octave. All up and down. And this is a practice. You don't do this one day and say, I got the notes. That's why I have a whole course on it. You practice it a little bit every day, as part of your practice sessions, 10, 15 minutes, depending on how long you're practicing. Hey, my iPad went blank. Learn the basic formulas for triad. I got, Dan, that you said you got that, but this is for everybody. The basic formulas for triad are the first, the third, and the fifth of any note in the scale. Again, if it's a C and your C scale, the first, third, and fifth would be C, E, G. If you're trying to make a D chord, that would be a triad D, E, F, G, A. I skipped every note. D, F, A. And then look at the intervals there. And you'll find that normally, it's natural that a major scale, if you take any note and make a chord out of it, here's how it's going to fall. The first one will be major, second minor, third minor, fourth major, fifth major. Sixth is minor again. Again, the intervals just naturally fall that way. The seventh is the diminished. And then 8 is the start, back to the beginning. It's the same as 1. Practice playing those triads. Just try to find them on the guitar neck. And don't think so hard about how to do it. Look for the sound. Look for the sound. Now that is an arpeggio. I'm playing one note at a time. I can't actually play. See, it's because those 2 notes are on one string. There. I can play it that way. And I would try to find places like that all up and down the neck. Just do a little bit at a time. Don't stress over trying to get the whole neck. Just say, I spent this much time doing that. Because you'll never, getting the whole neck with those triads will not make you musical. It's just a support along the way to being able to know where the sounds are on the guitar neck. Spend a little bit of time and you do that time and that's it. You've achieved your goal. Not, do I understand the whole neck yet? You probably never will. It's one of those things. It's possible if you spend hours a day for years, yeah, but it's not likely most of us adults are going to just totally know all the triads up and down the guitar neck. It certainly may not be the best use of the time, and I'll come back to that. Now, here's the 4th step. And when I say step, it's not necessarily one after the other, though I would encourage to kind of spend a little time on one before going on to the next. Somewhere around, feel like if you spent enough time to have some facility with learning the notes up and down the neck. The 4th step is understanding where the chord forms are up and down the guitar neck. This is often it's often referred to as the cage system. CAGED is in CAGED. It's just an acronym for the major chord forms. CAGED means there are 5 chord forms. C, A, can everybody see? Yeah. C, A, G, E, and D. Now those are the C chord, A chord, G chord, and all that, but they're also, in the CAGED system, they're considered chord forms. So watch this. That's a C chord. I can play that C chord here. No, I played the C form here. That's not a C chord anymore, moving it up 2 steps. I have to refinger it to make it right. I think I can't see. Now I'm going to need to bar, or at least bar a little bit and do that, because these have to move up too. So I'm playing the C chord form. Same with D. I can play the D chord form here, but it's actually an E chord now. 2 half steps, 1 full step is an E chord. F, G, A. Okay. So here's how you practice that. Start with the C. Now find the next C after that. That's going to be this. It's an A chord form, right? A chord, but now I've memorized that. It's not I'm not calculating a formula. I memorized that. If that's a help down, I memorized from here. The next form is, after this form, the C chord form, the next form is an A form. The next form is a G form. Technically, it would be this. Whoops, off a fret. But that's not very practical to play most of the time. I often encourage students to just play the top notes of it, because that can be useful. This, not very practical for most people. Something's wrong there. Yeah, got it. Now, this is a G form. The next form is the E form, right? E, but I'm going to make it this way. Oh, there we go, off fret again. So I'm looking, the G form ended here, and that's where the E form is. And then finally is the D form. And again, it's going to start just after this pinky here. You can play just the top 3 notes. If you want to add the 4th string, I like it because that's the root, the bass note. You could bar it. It's not very practical. Most guitars don't play this chord like that. If you just want to stretch your fingers a bit, I find this kind of a nice in-between. But most students would be better off just playing that. So that's C. Those are all C's. There. I can't lock the area. Okay? Now, start there. C. Learn the C's up and down. Then go to D. Now, you go to the next form. The next form after D is C. Now you're at the C, right? What's the next form after C? I'm not expecting to memorize this already, but I know the next form after C is going to be the A form. Now comes the G form, and so on. So I went C, D, E, same thing, E, and go up the next. Start with the C, get comfortable with that, then add the D chord, and so on. That will help you to be able to play chord forms up and down the guitar neck. And it is a memorization process, but you're always using your ear to hear the notes. Listen if you hit the right notes, if you're hitting them properly, if the notes that you're playing sound like a major chord when it's supposed to be a major chord. If it doesn't, take a look, see what you did wrong. Keep listening. Listen all the time. Now, finally, if my iPad wouldn't keep turning off, I'm sure there's a setting for that. I'm going to have to find that. Practice chord progressions, because chords in and of themselves are not terribly useful. They're just a building block to playing chord progressions, which are a part of playing songs and improvisations. If you just practice chords, you're missing a big element. First of all, you're missing out how to technically change from one chord to another quickly. And that's very important. It's at least as important as knowing chords. I'd prefer you learn less chords and learn to change in progressions faster and smoother before adding more chords. Just spending much time learning chords is really a very long way around the block because you're not likely to be able to use them practically. Second, the sound comes from the movement of chords, not from the chord itself. The song, the music, the emotion aspect of it comes from the movement. And you want to, again, listen to the chordal movement and learn to listen and aim at the sound that you want based on moving the chord, not just playing a chord. You have to be able to finger the chords to do that, but I would pretty quickly get to moving from one chord to another and not just sitting there learning chords. Now it depends on what style you want to learn, which chords progressions. I would start simple with just very simple chord progressions, but that's a little different if you're playing country music, if you're playing jazz, even if you're playing blues. There are chord progressions that are used much more often in blues than they're used in country music, for an example, though there's a lot of crossover. So that would depend, basically, which chord progressions to work on. Okay. Now, this is the second part of this discussion. Dan, and I hope you're on the call. Feel free to ask questions or to make comments. You said your goal is to learn the chords up and down the guitar neck. And I would like to encourage you to ask yourself, first of all, where are you trying to get to? Now, I know it sounds the obvious low-hanging fruit is, well, I want to be a chords up and down neck. But the next part of that is, I think, very important. Why? Why do you want to do that? And whatever answer you come up with, I would ask why again. And trying to drill down. Now, here's why I'm suggesting you do that. The third part of that is now ask what I think is a better question than how do you play up and down the neck. The better question, at least initially, is what's the best way to get to where I want to go? And it may not be spending a lot of time learning triads up and down the guitar neck, or chords even up and down the guitar neck. So it depends on your goal. And I don't know your ultimate goal. That's something you'll need to spend time on, and really, you might even have to spend time and think it out. It might not be as obvious right from the beginning. What are you really trying to do? Where do you want to get to? What do you want to see yourself doing? What would really excite you? Playing chords up and down the guitar up and down the fretboard has to be only in service to another goal, because in and of itself, other than an intellectual pursuit, it's probably not going to be that big of it's not going to be that something you really feel great about if you can't use it in some kind of practical way or some way that it's, again, in service of a bigger goal. If you're trying to play, I'm pretty sure it's not the case, but if you were trying to play folk songs or country songs, that would not be the best use of your time. That would be not where you want to spend your time learning chord forms up and down the guitar neck. That's not going to do much. That's not where the emphasis should be on that styles of music. If you're playing some forms of jazz, and it depends on what jazz and what you want to do with it, that might be more in line with that goal. Though I still say there probably are better ways to spend your time. And that's the issue. It's not one's bad and one's good. It's just what's the best way to use the time that I have to practice, whatever it is, 10 minutes, 10 hours a day, whatever. What's the best way to use that time to get to where I want to go? So these are questions I encourage you and everyone to ask yourself. What's the best way to do this? And ask. Ask me, ask other guitar players, ask people on YouTube videos, ask other students, if they're doing something and it looks like it would help you get to where you want to go, ask how they did that or how their thinking is around that. But always try to dig down a little bit. I first thought I was going to learn piano by memorizing all the notes on the piano keyboard. I was very young and naive. And, I come from a kind of an intellectual. I was a young scientist type kid. And I was known as the mad scientist in my class when I was 13, 14. I even got pulled out of school for somebody else got hurt with some of my science projects. And I got pulled out of the school. Anyway, that's a whole story. So when I started playing music, I realized this was something I really wanted and needed in my life, to be able to express myself more emotionally. And music was a great way to do that. Music really moved me. I was coming at it from an intellectual point of view, and it was naive. I tried to learn the notes on the piano by memorizing the notes, and it was not the most practical way to do that. It was not the best use of my time. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot over the years, and I try to impart what I can to students so they're not wasting time or getting frustrated because what they're doing is not getting where they want to go, not getting them where they want to go. Okay, so I'm going to end that subject. Let's see if we got some more questions. I'll start from the top, so hopefully I won't miss any. Question: what is a good way to memorize music chords and words in music? My band has another show questionable about music stands. Mark, I think I understand the first part of your question, but the part about my band has another show questionable about music stands, I don't understand that. So maybe you could ask that another way, and I'll start with the question: what's a good way to memorize music chords? And I assume you mean guitar chords and words in music. I don't do a lot of memorizing singing, and so it's not something that, you know, somebody who plays and sings a lot and has to play a lot of songs probably knows more about that. I do know music, though, and I find it very helpful to memorize music, especially more complex music parts, because then I can put my heart into it. When I'm always having to read the music on sheets, even if it sounds technically like I can get to the notes on time, I can't really put my full heart into it and really put some emotion in the music. What I do is I first of all will go through the whole thing several times and just get a hang of how I should play it. Now with songs, what I do is I'll go to a YouTube video and I'll actually get the chords in the YouTube video and I'll try to play along. No intention of getting it perfect, just the best I can. I'll do that several times, and of course it gets a little better as I go. But that's not the end of it. Then I'll stop and I'll start trying to play with the sheet without the song. Now I'm just learning the song, so it's not just memorizing yet. I'm just trying to see if I can play the song even with the sheet music. Once, I'll do that back and forth a few times. Once I feel that I'm playing the song pretty well without having to watch the video, just by the sheet, now I'm going to start taking away the sheet. And I'll break it down. I'll start with just the verse. And usually I'll start with half a verse. Often the verses there's a lot of repeating. So I'll start with the part that seems like it's repeating a lot, so I get a lot more bang for my time. And I'll try to just play that much. And then I'll put the sheet back up and try a little bit more. And if I get lost, I'll put the sheet up, play through it again, the whole thing, the whole verse is what I meant. And then take it away and see if I can play it without. And keep going back and forth. When I feel fairly confident, I don't get perfect, now I'll go on to the chorus and do the same thing. And when I can get the chorus, I'll put the verse and the chorus together and see if I can play it without the sheet. Can't do it, put it back up, see where I got lost, just practice that part, take it away again. Keep doing that until I can play it without. And it seems to work for me. It works also with more complex music. I basically will take the first line, or sometimes I'll even narrow it down to a couple bars or a bar, depending how complex it is. And I'll just play through that, play through the next few bars, try to put them together, take away the sheet music again, play through it. I always start from trying to play the whole piece so I have an idea how the layout is. And I do the same thing with songs. I want to hear the whole song and be able to play it before I start taking away the sheet. Next question. I have been studying my strumming and learning to pick up strumming patterns in funk and Spanish. Okay. Honestly, I don't understand the question. I think the question is, how can I get better at strumming? And the style is Spanish and funk. I will link to some lessons on that, and the problem is I don't really know where you're at or where your problem is. Just getting better is an awful open-ended question with, I don't know where we're starting from. So I don't know if you're having a problem with rhythm, or if you're having a problem with the technique of whether you need to, learn more about the basic technique, I would suggest that you get good at technique and play with a metronome so that you're clear on if you're in rhythm and time or not. But then, depending on where your problems are, I would suggest different things. Next question. I'm trying to understand funk and Latin strumming. For example, the 16-note strumming. How do I practice funk? I can't answer that question. I don't know how to approach that. I don't really know funk strumming patterns, so I can't even talk about how to play funk strumming. Spanish guitar, I can. Next. Hi from Istanbul. Hi. Okay. It looks like I've answered all the questions. I'm going to go ahead and do the ones I could answer. I'm going to go ahead and do the drawing. And if you have any additional questions, I will take another look before I end for today. And today I have my gray hat serving for the Real Guitar Live. Okay, let's see. So this is for people who have completed the 20 practice sessions for the month of July in the Real Guitar Success membership. So this is where you have a practice session each weekday. You spend 10 minutes on it, then check it off. That's it. You can come back if you haven't perfected, if you want to, but the only requirement is that you spend 10 minutes on it and then check it off. Do that 5 days a week, and you get entered into a drawing for a $50 Amazon gift card. And the winner is Jalma. Jalma, good job. And everyone who has participated and practiced their sessions for each of the weekdays, congratulations. You did a great job. And let me see if there's no more questions. I just realized I wasn't added. Thank you all for joining me. I look forward to seeing you the next Real Guitar Success session. It's going to be the first Thursday of next month, the first Thursday of every month. Take care.